Welcome to the Memories of the Dead. I'm Meeka Nomicon, and we're laying with the dead on broken concrete. You don't know me, and you never will, as the gore in your head begins to braid with the rubble underneath us. I lay next to you. My transformation is nearly complete. My eyes have not yet matched your vision, slightly impaired in the left eye to where the leaves that hang off the autumn trees blur with the sun. We both fell, if you think about it. If any neurons are still as part, no one will realize you've been decaying here until a few hours from now. Wait, so how long has she been here decaying for? I mean, clearly long enough for us to transform into her. I want to tell you that I love you. You'll never know how long I've been watching you. How it breaks me to see your body dissolving. I am a child of God. I was a child of God. I once had wings that stretched between the tops of skylines. I once had a halo to illuminate the streets for God's word. When we arose from the dandelions in the dirt, He embraced us. But He would never show us love again. For He is a coward, drunk on His own selfish gospels, written by disciples who will never meet Him. I was a watcher. I would sit at a desk surrounded by clouds and with an endless window of sunset, observing followers. Any sins that they kept from their pastors, their priests, their brothers and sisters, their daughters and sons, I would see. I would see the furrowing of brows and the clenching of fists in hesitation. I would see every drop of sweat across sheets. I would see every bruise left from skin-on-skin contact, every tear the other would allow to seep into cuts and bruises. I would be the one to send them to endless void or into paradise. But paradise gets boring after a while. I suppose it would, Bruce. I mean, it would never truly be our paradise, right? This would be paradise for the ones that enter it, the humans. I wonder what paradise for a child of God would look like. Conflict is what drives humans, I guess. If there is no challenge, humans sink. The walls of glass and granite in their heads crumble. It is awful to see. It turns into a sort of mania. You can see it in their eyes, clawing at their skin enough to crack it and let the blood splash against white marble, pulling out their hair in clumps and crying until there were no more tears to be produced. The handlers would take those like that away. You would never see them again. I assumed they were taken to drift in the silence of abyss for eternity, charmed by their own madness. Are you scared? Don't be. Wherever you're going is much better than the white columns and empty song of heaven. Anything is, even abyss. I've observed so many people over so many centuries. Kings, queens, martyrs, peasants, servants, heathens. The amount of knowledge I have on sprawling individuals could rebuild the library of Alexandria. Fascinating, isn't it? But the way I looked at it all changed with you. Your name was Natasha Isakova. I thought it was beautiful. You wanted to be a harpist. Your father brought you a harp when you were 7. Before then, the only items in your bedroom were a lamp, an empty dollhouse, a mattress, and a holy book. I should have found that despicable the first time I saw it. Only years later did I realize your blankets were sometimes too thin for the cold. Your family wanted you homeschooled, but you insisted on making new friends. You were the first to greet other children on the playground. With a gap in your teeth, with your then brown hair shaped at odd angles, because your mother's hands were not as stable as they once were. You often had scrapes on your pale skin, from running through grass or sliding across dirt and rubble. Up until the age of 10, you were devout to God. Sermons brought you to your knees, and your eyes leaking without any sound to capture them. Your best friend, who showed you the truth, is doing fine. By the way, I know you haven't spoken to her since she left for college. She teaches first grade now in a small town. She still braids her hair the way you taught her and secures it to wrap around her skull. She hasn't forgotten about you, and instead, she thinks you're the one who did. I replicated your voice, down to the way you sometimes roll your R's and the hiccup in your laugh. Perhaps I'll give her a call, keep up a card. She won't be able to tell the difference, I'm sure. You know, I'm not sure if that would be a mercy or an evilness to do. I mean, you're not going to be her, but if you're able to know everything about Natasha, to mimic her down to her speech pattern, maybe it would be nice to give them closure, especially if they were best friends for years. As long as they never found out the truth that you were really not her. We're only to watch believers. By the age of 12, any drop of praise for a Lord who would never see your face was gone. I was asked to move on. I watched thousands a day, not just you. The mind of an angel dressed in silk with eyes across translucent skin is much more complicated than a human being could understand. But you were my favorite. I couldn't let you go. Someone with such light threatening to be snuffed out by everyone around you was so precious. Angels aren't supposed to feel. You continued to play the harp. You fell in love with old books on vampires and monsters and artists. I read them with you, sometimes beside you. Guardian angels sit out of sight to learn things that their own father wouldn't. There's a quote that stuck with me from when we read Dorian Gray. Some things are more precious because they don't last long. You grew into leather jackets and skirts above your knee. At 15, you started painting women with blood down their noses, sweat clinging to their hair with an axe above their head, not wielded by their own hands. You pretended to go to church with friends instead of with your family. It was an obvious lie, but your family believed you. I think they just didn't want to try convincing you again. So they tried subliminally. Your mother always wore a silver cross on her neck and hosted studies at her home. You would hole yourself up in your room, painting or playing games by yourself. The only reason you were really social was to get out of the house. Not that your parents hated you, they loved you. You know, when you look at your father, silent as ever, a crease in his brow and a narrowing of his eyes that just tell you he is disappointed. You couldn't bear it. Neither could I. On a Sunday mornings, you and your friends would ride your bikes through your small suburban town. For Christmas, one year, you asked for one with a basket. Yours was a soft baby blue, and you'd ride it from your house on a quiet street to the park by the convenience store. There was a cemetery across the street, belonging to a meeting house. No one ever visited. But after you and your friends would part ways, and you would make the trip home, you'd walk between the graves. Sometimes you would sit in the grass to get to know the residents of the dirt. The dead don't get the love they deserve. Who knows where they ended up? School was easy for you. You, more so, would get into this mindset of not doing anything when you were stressed. So, you wouldn't turn in work on time, or you'd be up until 4 a.m. to finish it. You didn't know what to do when it came to applying to college, So, you became a fine art student. You continued painting. Your father was against it. Who wants art these days? Your mother was kinder. She gave you a prayer candle when you left for the city. You never lit it. Your friends called you Nat. You always had paint under your fingertips and pen behind your ear. You would go to coffee at the same spot. You would always get an iced caramel frap, even if it was below 0 outside. I have your taste buds. I'll love it just as much as you did. You know, it's borderline creepy how obsessed we were with this one human. I mean, what's our plan here? I mean, we did say they discover her decaying body, right? So, do we want to try and take over her life? I mean, it seems like that's the goal, right? That's why we're mimicking her down to her taste buds. In which case, I would suggest hiding the body. There was a church on your walk home to your dorm. It's a weird spot, stitched in a large city, amongst small taco shops and pharmacies. Sometimes, you would stop to admire it, promise yourself that you'd paint it. You never did. I'd sometimes watch you from the spires as you'd take your phone out and take photographs of the stone against the sunset. The digital medium can never pick up the essence of an angel, but I was there. While you stood in pretty scarves and hats and chokers with spikes to ward off men who stared at you with hungry eyes, wanting to dig into your flesh. You visited art museums and stared at how beautiful the women were painted. They reminded you of your first crush, an actress in a movie about 2 women isolated on an island. You loved the way she smiled, how her eyelashes would sway away from her nose. You never found love with another person. Your love was with your art. And it drove you to your downfall. For the first time in your life, with the remainder of hair dye on your hands, with lip gloss staining your teeth, you were in love with yourself. You were Natasha, the painter of your own horrors. You were featured in advertisements for the school's art department. You were excelling in class, and you were well loved. I had all my ears to listen. No one ever thought a single bad thing about you. If anything, they were jealous. But you still felt alone. The canvas was more fragmented mirror, and paint strokes were bloody nails clawing into a wall. When you started painting, you wouldn't remember how you did it. You would come back to reality with clumps of your hair torn out and saliva dripping from your mouth. The piece would be done. At points, you wouldn't recognize reality anymore. When you tried playing the harp like you did as a child, your hands shook, unable, like your mother's. You cut your finger on a string and threw the harp against the bedroom door. You never fixed that door. You would sit on the subway with nowhere to go for hours, staring in the blackness through the windows. I cannot pray, but I tried. I hoped this would pass. I hoped that you could get treatment, even if temporarily. But I was foolish. Some things cannot be fixed. When you have the expectations of the world on your shoulders, you feel like you can't ask anyone for help. That even showing that you need it is a weakness. There is nothing wrong with reaching out to someone, tears in your eyes telling them that you need assistance. But that's in the past. A week ago, you stopped going to class. Your friends would call you. You blocked everyone but your mother. You visited a museum you loved, staring at a woman by a cliffside, shielded by the sun with a parasol. You broke down crying in the middle of the gallery. and another patron was kind enough to give you tissues and escort you to the exit. You sat on the steps up to the museum for 3 hours after that, doing nothing but staring. 5 days ago, you sold all of your paintings or threw them out. You donated the money to arts programs in schools across the state or to artistic youth. A pretty girl asked you why you were selling your livelihood. You smiled and said it was to make room for new ideas. It was an obvious lie, but she just nodded and brought a small canvas piece of a woman cutting her daughter's hair. 3 days ago, you stopped eating. You lived on energy drinks that only made your paranoia worse. There's a huge arc like the one in Paris, at a park downtown. You stood underneath it and counted every rivet and circle carved by man. It took you hours. A fellow student asked if you were okay. You continued mumbling. She apologized and walked past you. Today, you called your mother. It went immediately to voicemail. Oh, so that answers our earlier question then. She's only very recently died. You told her you loved her, that you missed the smell of the cabbage rolls she would prepare on Friday nights, that you missed watching movies with her on the couch with milk and cookies while your father was away, that your hands shook like hers, you could barely pick up a brush, that the gaps in your memory were only getting worse. You couldn't remember the faces of your childhood friends. They became black silhouettes with generic names in your memories. 30 minutes ago, you passed by a store while walking to the building above us. You stared at a dress that reminded you of the harp days. It was just above the knee. The sleeves and the top half were black, while the rest was white. You did the finger motions of stringing along to a song your mother loved. I replicated the dress with the rest of my energy. Isn't it pretty? I wish you got to wear it yourself. For 20 minutes, on top of the building overlooking the city, you watched the cars and the lights. Everything looks so small when you're so high above it, doesn't it? I heard a rumor in my time as an angel that a sibling of mine, many, many years ago, sacrificed their angelhood, their holiness, to alter the course of a life. You see, time and day you're to die is planned out. The keepers know. They did not tell us. But you can feel it, a ruffle in the feathers of your wings, an eye becoming itchy. My sisters and brothers were already suspicious of me. I had asked what I could do 3 days before you ended up here, with your brains under your head and merging with stone. I asked about the fallen sibling. Granted, many of us have fallen for our own reasons. We become corrupt. We learn emotion. We learn that the lives in which we see are important. Each and every one of them. We're watching this whole time, and we have this power. We can stop this. I tried ripping my own halo off. The keepers grabbed me by the arms and dragged me to meet my father. God, the Lord, the Savior, whatever the hell the people call him. They held me by every limb and made me look at him with all 1,000 of my eyes. He didn't know my name. I was that forgetful to him. He asked me what I had done to be in front of him. My father, my provider of not life. My father who blessed my dandelion seed and carried me to my position. My father who I was bound to serve until the human race died, forced to find a new species to prey on. I told him, you were going to die soon. He asked me why I cared. I had seen millions die, hadn't I? Of course I had. But you weren't meant for this. The keepers had to be wrong about when you would die. that some power had to possess you and drive you mad. I started crying. Do you know what an angel's tears look like? Imagine the world's smoothest liquid gold with the heat of the hottest star in the galaxy. Imagine 1,000 eyes weeping for you to stay. The tear didn't even hit the ground before I started falling. When I was falling, I was naked, a human body with only a pair of eyes and my 4 limbs. They let you keep the wings on your head as a reminder of what you once were, of your shame. There are long scars along my back where my wings once were. I can feel them. I don't ever want to see them. I was falling right alongside you. You were still conscious. I think you were until the whole way down. Because we locked eyes. Mine are pitch black, yours are blue-violet. Despite all of my years watching you, I don't know what emotion you were feeling, with wind in your hair and a heaviness in your heart. Perhaps it was one I had never seen. And then it all ended. Content. And that's how we got here. When a fallen angel hits the ground, they take the form of the first person they come across. Oh, so it was never our idea then. So maybe we're not going to try and claim her life. Dead or living. Pretty novel that I got you, huh? What am I saying? I've been sitting here, laying with the dead on broken concrete for what feels like hours. I don't want to leave you. I wish I got to know you better, not as a watcher, but as a friend. I'll take your name and your face, but I cannot be you. I cannot go back to your friends, to your family, to your old life. I don't know what I'll do. The problem with fallen angels is that they live forever. They're bugs in a coat that never seem to fade away, no matter how many alterations to the reality you make. We don't need sleep. We don't need to eat. But I've heard we do anyways. Seem human to those around us. Some hide their wings under their hats. Some cut them off. But they make it. In an alternate world, I would be furious with my father. I'd think he was doing this as a test. I'd kill for him. Rumors circulated that fallen angels would torture every sin out of a sinner to let them back into heaven. But it never worked. I'm not upset. Yet, at least. I'm still numb from the fall. And for the fact you're just rotting here. Your cells are dying. If a dog doesn't find you and alert its owner in a few hours, you'll start to smell. I hope someone finds you. You wanted your body burnt and your ashes buried with a tree to help it grow in a melting world. I'll come visit that tree, a doppelganger visiting its original body. Would you mind if I read you stories? The ones you used to like? I should go. I stand up and dust myself off. No scrapes or bruises infect my pale skin this time. I give you one last look before I go. I didn't want the last image in my head to be of your mangled, blood-covered husk. The city air feels crisp. The weather is just right. The lights and sounds are bright and blaring outside the alley. Good night, Natasha. And so, I step into the world, looking for shelter for the night. So who do you reckon caused us to fall alongside Natasha? Do you reckon it was just our love for her that caused us to be in the same place? Or maybe God gave us one last kindness. If you enjoyed your time here, I'd really appreciate you to like this video and subscribe to this channel. But other than that, have a spooky day and I'll catch you next time, guys.